Elena Whitford stood in the doorway of Blackmore Manor, rain hammering the stones behind her, and faced the man they called the Ice Duke. Adrian Blackmore didn't even look at her when he spoke. "You're here because your father's debts left you no choice. I'm here because I need someone to manage a household. Don't mistake this arrangement for anything more." Behind him, two small faces peered around a corner, his daughters, pale and silent as ghosts. Elena lifted her chin. "Then we understand each other perfectly, Your Grace, because I didn't come here to be another decoration in your frozen house." If you want to see how a woman with nothing but courage dismantled a duke's icy fortress, stay until the end. Like this video and tell us what city you're watching from in the comments. The carriage ride to Blackmore Manor had taken 6 hours through November fog, so thick Elena couldn't see the horses pulling them. Her mother had cried the entire way to the coaching inn. Her father hadn't come at all. "You're doing a noble thing," her mother had whispered, gripping Elena's hands with fingers that trembled. "Saving the family." Noble. That was one word for it. Sacrificial was another. Desperate was probably the most accurate. Elena was 23 years old, unmarried by choice. She'd turned down 2 proposals from men who bored her to tears, and now being delivered like a piece of furniture to a man she'd met exactly once. The meeting had lasted 7 minutes. Adrian Blackmore had looked at her the way someone might assess a horse at auction, measuring, calculating, ultimately indifferent. "She'll do," he told her father. Not, "She's lovely." Not, "I look forward to knowing her better." Just, "She'll do." Her father had accepted eagerly, too eager, hands shaking as he signed the marriage contract. The Duke's money would clear their debts, restore their name, keep them from debtor's prison. All it cost was Elena's entire future. The carriage lurched to a stop. Elena peered through the rain-streaked window at Blackmore Manor, and her stomach dropped. It looked like something from a ghost story. 3 stories of dark stone, windows that reflected nothing, walls covered in ivy that seemed to strangle rather than decorate. No lights showed in most of the windows. The ones that did glow looked cold, unwelcoming. "We've arrived, miss," the driver called, his voice muffled by rain. "Miss." Not Mrs. Not yet. She had maybe 20 minutes left of being Elena Whitford before she became Elena Blackmore, the second Duchess, the replacement for the perfect dead wife everyone still whispered about. The door opened. A butler stood there with an umbrella, his face as welcoming as the stone walls. "Your Grace is waiting in the study," he said. Not welcome, not congratulations on your wedding day. Elena gathered her skirts, the dove gray ones because her mother said wearing mourning colors would be understanding of his loss, and stepped down into the rain. The umbrella didn't help much. By the time she reached the massive front door, the hem of her dress was soaked and heavy. Inside was worse than outside. The entry hall stretched up 3 stories, but it felt like a mausoleum. Dark wood panels absorbed what little light came from the chandelier. Portraits lined the walls. Blackmore ancestors, all looking grim and judgmental. At the far end hung a painting of a woman so beautiful, Elena stopped breathing. Blonde hair like spun gold, blue eyes that seemed to follow you, a smile that could melt iron. The first Duchess, the perfect one, the dead one. "This way," the butler said, his footsteps echoing on marble that looked like it had never known warmth. Elena followed him down a corridor lined with more portraits, more dark wood, more silence. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. That was the only sound. The study door was already open. Adrian Blackmore stood with his back to the entrance, looking out a window at the rain-soaked grounds. He didn't turn when Elena entered. "You're late," he said. "The fog," Elena replied, keeping her voice steady. "The roads were difficult." "Life is difficult, Miss Whitford. I expect you to manage it anyway." He still hadn't turned around. Elena stared at his back, broad shoulders and a perfectly tailored black coat, dark hair just touching his collar, posture so rigid he might have been carved from the same stone as his house. "Should I come back when you're ready to face me, Your Grace? Or is talking to the back of your head part of our arrangement?" That got him to turn. Adrian Blackmore was 40 years old and looked like someone had chiseled him from granite. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, eyes the color of winter storms. handsome in a way that was almost threatening. His mouth was set in a line that suggested smiling was something he'd forgotten how to do. "You have a sharp tongue," he said. "I have opinions. If that's going to be a problem, perhaps you should have mentioned it in your requirements, along with must tolerate being ignored and must not expect basic courtesy." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or annoyance. It was gone too quickly to tell. "I made my expectations clear to your father. You made them clear to my father, not to me. I'm the one marrying you, Your Grace. The least you could do is look me in the eye when you dismiss me. I'm not dismissing you." "No? Then what would you call it?" Adrian moved to his desk, picked up a stack of papers. "I'm outlining the terms of our arrangement so there's no confusion later. You will manage the household. You will be civil to guests. You will not interfere with the children's education or routine. In return, you'll have your own rooms, an allowance, and the protection of the Blackmore name." How romantic! Romance is not part of this arrangement. Clearly. Elena moved closer to the desk, close enough to see the marriage contract lying there, already signed in his harsh black signature. "What else? Should I curtsy when I see you? Speak only when spoken to? Sleep in a separate wing so I don't disturb your mourning?" His hand tightened on the papers. "My previous marriage is not your concern. And yet her portrait is the first thing anyone sees when they enter this house. The message is fairly clear, Your Grace. I'm the practical choice. She was the love story. That's enough." "Is it? Because I haven't even started. You want a housekeeper with a title. Fine. But I won't be a ghost in your ghost house. I won't tiptoe around pretending your first wife didn't exist. And I absolutely will not ignore 2 children who've clearly been forgotten in all this grief." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "My daughters," Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet, "are none of your business. They became my business the moment you put that ring on my finger, which you haven't done yet, by the way. We're supposed to be married in an hour, and you're treating me like an employee you're barely tolerating." "I don't have to tolerate anything. You need this marriage. I'm doing your family a favor." There it was. The truth beneath all the cold politeness. Elena should have backed down. Should have apologized, played the grateful bride, secured the arrangement that would save her family from ruin. That's what her mother would have done. What any sensible woman would do. Instead, she walked to the door. "Miss Whitford, it's still Miss Whitford until the ceremony, Your Grace. And right now, I'm going to my room to decide whether I'm actually going through with this." She didn't wait for his response. Didn't look back to see the shock on his face, and she knew it was there. Because men like Adrian Blackmore didn't hear the word no very often. The butler was waiting in the hall, probably eavesdropping. "Your rooms, miss?" "Please." He led her up 2 flights of stairs, down another endless corridor to a suite of rooms that were beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful. Perfect, untouchable, cold. A 4-poster bed with curtains that looked like they'd never been drawn. A wardrobe big enough to house a family. Windows that showed nothing but rain and fog. "The Duke will send for you at 4 o'clock for the ceremony," the butler said. "Mrs. Thorne will help you dress." "Who's Mrs. Thorne?" "The housekeeper. She also served as governess to the young ladies after—" He trailed off, uncomfortable. "After the first Duchess died?" "Yes, miss." And she's still the governess? How long has it been?" 5 years, miss." 5 years these children had been raised by a housekeeper playing governess, with a father who couldn't even look at them without seeing his dead wife. "Where are the girls now?" Elena asked. The butler's expression tightened. "In the nursery, miss. They take their meals there. The Duke prefers they remain upstairs." "He prefers his own children stay locked away?" "I couldn't say, miss." He absolutely could say. He just wouldn't. Elena waited until he left, then stood at the window watching rain turn the grounds into a watercolor painting. Gray on gray on gray. Even the gardens looked like they were dying. She should leave, should walk out right now, scandal be damned. Let her father face his creditors. Let society whisper. It would be better than spending her life in this frozen mausoleum with a man who saw her as a necessary inconvenience. A sound made her turn. 2 small faces peered around the doorframe. One, maybe 9 years old, 1, maybe 6. Dark hair like their father's. The older one had his winter storm eyes. The younger one had the golden hair from the portrait downstairs. They stared at Elena like she was a creature from another world. "Hello," Elena said softly. The older girl grabbed her sister's hand, ready to run. "Wait, please, I'm Elena. What are your names?" Silence. The girls looked at each other, having some kind of wordless conversation. Finally, the older one spoke. "I'm Charlotte. This is Lily. It's nice to meet you both." "Are you really marrying Papa?" Lily whispered. "That's the plan, if he doesn't scare me off first." Charlotte's eyes widened. "You're not afraid of him?" "Should I be? Everyone else is." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, making herself smaller, less threatening. "What about you two? Are you afraid of him?" Another one of those looks between the sisters. "We don't see him very much," Charlotte said carefully. "Mrs. Thorne says he's very busy with important matters." "I see. And what does Mrs. Thorne say about me?" "That you're here to manage the house, that we're not to bother you, that nothing will change." The way Charlotte said it, flat, rehearsed, like she'd been told this multiple times, made Elena's chest tighten. "Well, Mrs. Thorne is wrong, because things are already changing, starting with you two sneaking around like little ghosts. When I'm Duchess, you'll come down for dinner. You'll sit in the drawing room. You'll be part of this family." "Papa won't like it," Lily said, her voice barely audible. "Probably not, but he'll get used to it." Charlotte studied Elena with those storm cloud eyes, so much like her father's. "Why would you do that? Nobody fights with Papa, not even the servants." "Maybe someone should." A clock somewhere chimed 3. 1 hour until the ceremony. Elena stood. "You should probably go before someone notices you're missing. But Charlotte, Lily, I want you to know something. Your mother died, and that's terrible. Your father's grieving, and that's understandable. But you two? You're still here, still alive, still growing, and you deserve more than being kept upstairs like family secrets." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. Charlotte blinked hard, fighting them. "Do you promise," Charlotte whispered, "that things will change?" "I promise I'll try. That's all I can do." The girls ran before Elena could say anything else, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Elena listened to them go, then looked at herself in the mirror. Dove-gray dress, dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, green eyes that looked too bright against her pale skin. Not beautiful like the portrait downstairs, not refined or elegant or perfect, just Elena Whitford, about to become someone's second choice. She could still leave. Should leave. This house was full of ghosts and grief, and Adrian Blackmore clearly didn't want a wife. He wanted a manager who'd stay out of his way. But those two little girls, Charlotte and Lily, hiding in doorways, asking if Elena was afraid of their own father, being told nothing would change, that they'd remain invisible, that the best they could hope for was to not be a bother. Elena had grown up with parents who, for all their faults, had loved her, had tucked her in at night and asked about her day and celebrated her small victories. These girls had none of that. They had a dead mother they probably barely remembered, and a living father who couldn't stand to look at them. At 4 o'clock exactly, Mrs. Thorne appeared, a thin woman in severe black with a mouth like a knife slash and eyes that assessed and found Elena wanting in approximately 3 seconds. "Time for the ceremony, miss. I've brought flowers." She held out a small bouquet of white roses. They looked like they'd been made of wax. "Thank you." "The Duke doesn't like tardiness." "The Duke doesn't like much of anything, from what I can tell." Mrs. Thorne's expression froze. "That's not appropriate, miss. Neither is keeping 2 children locked in a nursery like prisoners, but here we are." They stared at each other. Mrs. Thorne broke first, looking away with pressed lips. The ceremony took place in a small chapel attached to the manor. Rain hammered the stained glass windows. A vicar with kind eyes and nervous hands performed the service. Adrian stood at the altar like a man facing execution, his face revealing nothing. Elena walked down the aisle alone. Her family hadn't been invited, and took her place beside a stranger who was about to become her husband. "Dearly beloved," the vicar began. The words washed over Elena like cold water. "For better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part." Adrian's voice when he said his vows was steady, emotionless, like he was reading from a contract, which, essentially, he was. Elena's voice shook slightly on hers, not from fear, from anger at the unfairness of it all, that she was marrying a man who'd never once asked what she wanted, what she hoped for, what she dreamed about. "You may kiss the bride." Adrian looked at her for the first time since she'd entered the chapel. His eyes were so cold Elena could practically feel frost forming. He leaned in, pressed his lips to hers for exactly 1 second, no warmth, no feeling, nothing but duty, and pulled back. "It's done," he said. Yes, it was done. Elena Whitford no longer existed. In her place stood Elena Blackmore, the second Duchess, the replacement, the woman who'd just married ice itself. The wedding breakfast was a dismal affair in a dining room that could have seated 40 but held only 3. Elena, Adrian, and Mrs. Thorne, who'd apparently been invited to ensure no inappropriate conversations occurred. Adrian didn't speak. He ate in silence, his attention on documents he'd brought to the table because apparently even his wedding breakfast needed to be productive. "Where are the girls?" Elena asked, breaking the suffocating quiet. "In the nursery," Mrs. Thorne answered, "where they belong." "It's their father's wedding day. Shouldn't they be here? The Duke has made it clear." "I'm asking the Duke." Adrian looked up from his papers, annoyed at the interruption. "Made what clear?" "Whether your daughters are allowed to attend your wedding breakfast, or if they're permanently confined to the 3rd floor. His jaw tightened. Their routine is not to be disrupted. Having breakfast with their father would disrupt their routine? Yes. Then their routine is the problem, not the solution. Mrs. Thorne made a strangled sound. Adrian set down his fork with careful precision. "Your Grace," he said, and the way he said it was a warning. "You've been the Duchess for approximately 20 minutes. I suggest you learn the household before you attempt to reorganize it." "I've learned enough. I've learned that 2 children are being raised without affection, without family, without anyone who sees them as people instead of obligations. That is not your concern. You made it my concern when you married me and told me to manage this household. Or did you mean I should manage the furniture and ignore the children?" The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Adrian stood, his chair scraping against marble. "This conversation is over." He left. Didn't excuse himself, didn't finish his meal, just walked out like Elena was too insignificant to bother with. Mrs. Thorne smiled, thin and victorious. "His Grace doesn't tolerate insubordination, Your Grace. You'd do well to remember that." Elena smiled back, just as thin. "And I don't tolerate cruelty disguised as routine. You do well to remember that, Mrs. Thorne." She left the housekeeper sitting there and went upstairs. Not to her own rooms, but to the 3rd floor, following the sound of a child crying. The nursery was at the end of the corridor, behind a door marked with a small brass plate that said children. Not their names, just children, like they were a category, not people. Elena knocked softly. The crying stopped. "It's me," she called. "Elena, may I come in?" Footsteps. Then the door cracked open. Charlotte stood there, her eyes red. Behind her, Lily was curled in a window seat, tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" Elena asked. "Mrs. Thorne said... She said you'd probably leave, that Papa always makes people leave, that we shouldn't get our hopes up about anything changing because nothing ever changes here." Elena pushed the door open wider. "Move." Charlotte stumbled back. Elena walked into the nursery, and her anger, which had been simmering since she arrived, ignited into pure rage. The room was spotless, perfectly organized, books arranged by size, toys lined up like soldiers, 2 small beds with hospital corners, a schedule on the wall outlining every hour of every day. Wake at 6, wash at 6:15, breakfast at 6:30, lessons 7 to noon, exercise noon to 1, more lessons until 4, dinner at 5, bed at 7, no playtime, no free time. No childhood. "This is your room?" Elena asked quietly. Charlotte nodded. "And you follow this schedule every day?" Another nod. "Who made it?" "Mrs. Thorne. She says structure is important, that Mama would have wanted us to be disciplined." "Did you know your Mama?" Lily shook her head. "I was only 1. Charlotte was 4. She doesn't remember much." Elena walked to the schedule, read it again, felt sick. These girls weren't being raised. They were being managed, controlled, turned into perfect little automatons who'd never caused their grieving father any trouble. She ripped the schedule off the wall. Both girls gasped. From now on, Elena said, things are going to be different. Starting tonight, you're coming down for dinner. But Mrs. Thorne doesn't make the rules anymore. I do. And my first rule is that you two are part of this family, which means you eat with the family. Papa will be angry, Charlotte whispered. Papa is already angry. At least this way he'll be angry about something worthwhile. She left them there, stunned and hopeful and terrified, and went to find Mrs. Thorne. The housekeeper was in her office, a small room off the kitchen that smelled like vinegar and disappointment. Mrs. Thorne, I need to speak with you. The housekeeper looked up from her ledgers. Yes, Your Grace? The children will be joining us for dinner tonight. Please have places set for them. I'm afraid that's not possible. His Grace specifically, I'm giving you a direct order. Either you follow it, or we'll find a housekeeper who will. Mrs. Thorne's face went white with rage. You cannot dismiss me. I've served this family for 20 years. Then you should know better than anyone that things need to change. Those girls are being suffocated by routine. They need warmth, affection, normalcy. When was the last time they laughed? The Duke wants them disciplined. The Duke wants them invisible because looking at them reminds him of his dead wife. But they're not ghosts, they're children, and I won't let you turn them into miniature versions of this frozen house. You'll regret this, Mrs. Thorne said, her voice shaking. His Grace will never allow it. Then let him tell me himself. But Adrian didn't appear for dinner. Apparently he took his meals in his study now, too busy for family, which meant Elena sat at the massive dining table with Charlotte and Lily, who looked like they expected the ceiling to collapse any second. You don't have to look so terrified, Elena said. It's just dinner. We've never eaten down here before, Charlotte whispered. Well, you are now, and you'll keep eating down here, every night. Lily picked at her food. Charlotte kept glancing at the door, waiting for their father to storm in. Elena talked to fill the silence, told them about growing up in the country, about her brothers who were terrors, about the time she'd tried to teach herself to ride and ended up in a pond with a very offended horse. Slowly, carefully, the girls started to relax. Lily even smiled once. It was a small victory, but it was victory nonetheless. After dinner, Elena walked them back upstairs. At the nursery door, Charlotte grabbed her hand. Thank you, she said quietly. For trying. I'm not trying, Charlotte. I'm succeeding. Tomorrow we're going for a walk in the gardens. And the day after that, we're reading something besides etiquette books. And the day after that, we're finding out what you two actually enjoy instead of what Mrs. Thorne thinks you should enjoy. For the first time since Elena had arrived, Charlotte smiled. A real smile. Small and hesitant, but real. Elena went to bed that night in her cold, perfect room, knowing she'd just declared war on the Duke of Blackmore and his frozen house. And she didn't regret it for a second. The war began at breakfast. Elena came down at 8 to find Adrian already seated, reading a letter with the kind of focus most people reserved for military strategy. He didn't look up when she entered, didn't acknowledge her at all. She sat, poured her own tea because apparently the servants had been instructed to treat her like furniture. 5 minutes of silence. 10. Your Grace, Elena said finally. I'm speaking to you. I'm aware. He still didn't look up from the letter. The girls will be joining us for breakfast tomorrow. That got his attention. Adrian set down the letter with the careful precision of someone restraining themselves from throwing it. No, they will not. Yes, they will. I've already informed Mrs. Thorne. His jaw clenched. You informed her, without consulting me. I'm consulting you now, retroactively. That's not how this works. Then explain to me how it does work, because right now it seems like you run this house by pretending your children don't exist. Adrian stood so abruptly his chair scraped against marble. My daughters have a routine that has been carefully established for their well-being. You've been here one day, and you think you understand what they need better than I do. I think you haven't looked at what they need in 5 years. I think you've handed them over to a housekeeper who treats them like inconvenient pets that need to be kept quiet and out of sight. Mrs. Thorne is an excellent governess. Mrs. Thorne is a warden. Those girls don't have a childhood. They have a prison schedule. Adrian's eyes went cold as winter sea. You know nothing about my daughters. I know they asked me if I was afraid of you. I know they cried when Mrs. Thorne told them nothing would ever change. I know Lily is 6 years old and lives by a timetable that would make a soldier weep. Discipline is important. So is love, so is laughter, so is being treated like human beings instead of problems to be managed. This conversation is over. He walked out. Again. Apparently that was his signature move. Leave when things got uncomfortable. Elena sat there in the silence, her hands shaking with rage she couldn't quite release. Around her, the dining room stretched vast and empty, all dark wood and cold marble and that horrible sense that the house itself was holding its breath. A maid appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with something between shock and admiration. Your Grace? Would you like anything else? Yes, Elena said. I'd like the children's breakfast moved to the family dining room, starting tomorrow, every morning. But His Grace, I'm Her Grace, and I'm telling you what's going to happen. The maid's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. Yes, Your Grace. Small victory, but victory nonetheless. Elena spent the morning exploring the house, getting lost in corridors that seemed to multiply like a maze. Every room she entered felt abandoned, furniture covered in dust sheets, fireplaces that hadn't seen flames in years, windows so grimy they turned daylight gray. In the portrait gallery, she found them, 3 generations of Blackmores, all looking stern and disapproving. And there, prominently displayed in the best light, was her, the first Duchess, Caroline. Elena stood in front of the painting for a long time, studying the woman who'd left such an enormous shadow. Caroline had been beautiful in that delicate, ethereal way that made men write poetry. Blonde hair and perfect ringlets, rosebud mouth, eyes so blue they looked almost unreal. She wore a white dress with pink roses, and she looked like she'd never had a harsh thought in her entire life. She was very kind. Elena turned. An elderly maid stood in the doorway, clutching a dustcloth like a shield. You knew her? Elena asked. I was her lady's maid for 7 years until... The woman's voice cracked. Until she passed. What was she like? The maid came closer, staring up at the portrait with eyes that held old grief. Gentle. So gentle. Never raised her voice, never said a harsh word about anyone. The Duke adored her. We all did. Of course, perfect wife, perfect duchess, perfect everything. She loved those girls more than life itself, the maid continued. Used to spend hours in the nursery playing with them, reading to them. The house was different then, full of music and light. When she died, the woman shook her head. It all went dark. His Grace locked himself in his study for 3 days. When he came out, he was different, cold. Wouldn't go near the nursery. Hired Mrs. Thorne and told her to handle everything. Elena's chest tightened. He's been grieving for 5 years? More than grieving, drowning in it. Won't let anyone mention her name. Had all her things packed away. Acts like if he just keeps moving forward, keeps busy enough, he won't have to feel it. That's not grief. That's running. The maid looked at Elena with something like pity. You seem like a good woman, Your Grace. But this house, it breaks good women. Breaks everyone eventually. Maybe you should just learn to live with how things are instead of trying to change them. She left before Elena could respond. Live with how things are. Accept the cold, the silence, the slow suffocation of a house that had forgotten how to breathe. No. Elena found the girls in the schoolroom, hunched over slates while Mrs. Thorne paced behind them like a prison guard. Lily, your penmanship is atrocious. Do it again. Charlotte, you've spelled obedience incorrectly 20 more times, both words. Actually, Elena said from the doorway, they're going to do something else right now. Mrs. Thorne spun around, her face pinched with outrage. Your Grace, this is the children's lesson time. I must insist that they come with me for a walk in the gardens. Fresh air is educational too. His Grace has made it very clear that their schedule is not to be disrupted. His Grace isn't here. I am. Girls, get your coats. Charlotte and Lily looked between Elena and Mrs. Thorne like spectators at a tennis match, clearly terrified to move either direction. "If you take them," Mrs. Thorne said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage, "I will report this directly to His Grace." "Please do. I look forward to the conversation." Elena held out her hands. After a moment's hesitation, Lily took one. Then Charlotte took the other. Mrs. Thorne's face went purple. "You have no right." "I have every right. I'm their stepmother. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're going to do something radical. We're going to enjoy ourselves." The gardens were overgrown and half wild, but there was beauty in the chaos. Roses climbed walls with determination. Ivy covered pathways. A fountain in the center had long since stopped working, but birds bathed in the still water. Elena led the girls down a gravel path, listening to their footsteps crunch in the silence. "You're really not afraid of Mrs. Thorne?" Lily asked. "Should I be?" "Everyone else is." "I'm not everyone else." Charlotte had been quiet since they left the schoolroom. Now she spoke, her voice small. "Papa is going to be very angry." "I know." "Then why are you doing this?" Elena stopped walking, crouched down so she was eye level with both girls. "Because you two deserve more than being locked in a nursery like shameful secrets. Because your mother loved you, and she'd be heartbroken to see how you're living. Because someone needs to fight for you, and apparently I'm the only one willing to do it." Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes. "You didn't know, Mama." "No, but I know you, and that's enough." They walked for an hour, exploring forgotten corners of the garden. Elena showed them how to make dandelion chains. They found a robin's nest and watched the mother bird feed her babies. Lily actually laughed, when a butterfly landed on her hand. When they returned to the house, Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall. His fury was the quiet kind, which was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "Girls, upstairs, now!" Charlotte and Lily ran without argument, their footsteps echoing on marble. Elena faced her husband, chin up, ready for battle. "My study," Adrian said. "Now." She followed him into that cold room with its heavy curtains and heavier silence. Adrian closed the door, which somehow made the space feel smaller. "What exactly," he said, his voice deadly calm, "did you think you were doing? Taking the children for a walk. Is that a crime? You deliberately undermined Mrs. Thorne's authority. You disrupted the girls' schedule. You ignored my explicit instructions. Your explicit instructions are suffocating them. They need structure. They need a parent." The words hung between them like a physical thing. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "You know nothing about being a parent," he said quietly. "And you're an expert? When's the last time you actually spoke to your daughters? Played with them? Asked them about their day? I provide for them. I ensure they have everything they need. Except you. They need you, and you won't even look at them because you're so busy mourning a woman who's been dead for 5 years that you've forgotten the people who are still alive." "Do not," Adrian said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "presume to tell me about my wife. I'm not talking about your wife. I'm talking about your daughters. 2 little girls who are growing up thinking their father can't stand the sight of them. That's not—" He stopped, jaw working. "Isn't it? Charlotte told me she can't remember the last time you hugged her. Lily asked if you were angry at them for something they did. They think you blame them for their mother's death." Adrian's face went white. "That's absurd." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you handed them over to Mrs. Thorne, so you wouldn't have to deal with the fact that they exist. Out of sight, out of mind, very convenient. Get out." "No. I said get out. And I said no. Fire me if you want. Annul this marriage. Send me back to my father in disgrace. But I'm not going to stand here and pretend that what's happening in this house is acceptable." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the air between them crackling with anger and something else, something rawer. "You've been here 2 days," Adrian said. "You know nothing about this family, nothing about what we've been through. Then tell me. Explain to me why locking your children away and letting a bitter housekeeper raise them is somehow for their own good." "Mrs. Thorne is not bitter. Mrs. Thorne despises those girls because they remind her that your perfect first wife is dead, and she's stuck managing the aftermath. Don't pretend you haven't noticed. Adrian turned away, walked to the window. His shoulders were rigid, hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was empty. You don't understand. Then help me understand. I can't look at them without seeing her. Charlotte has her eyes. Lily has her smile. Every time I try to... He stopped, his control fracturing. Every time I try, it's like she's there, and then she's not, and it's unbearable. Elena's anger shifted into something more complicated. Not pity, he'd hate that, but something closer to understanding. So you avoid them, she said quietly, and they think it's their fault. It's not their fault. Have you told them that? Silence. Adrian. She used his name for the first time, and he flinched at the intimacy of it. Those girls are not ghosts of Caroline. They're themselves, unique individual people who deserve to be known for who they are, not mourned for who they're not. I know that. Then act like it. He turned, and the look on his face was so raw it hurt to see. I don't know how. The admission cost him. She could see it in the way he held himself, like the words had been dragged out against his will. Start small, Elena said. Have breakfast with them. Ask about their lessons. Learn what makes them laugh. And if I can't? If I try and I still see her? Then you try again and again, until one day you don't. Adrian looked at her like she'd suggested he move mountains. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's hard, but it's necessary. Because right now, you're losing them. They're slipping away into silence and obedience, and one day they'll be strangers. Is that what you want? Of course not. Then fight for them, the way I'm fighting for them. Something shifted in his expression, not agreement exactly, but the beginning of something, a crack in the ice. You're relentless, he said. I prefer determined. It's the same thing. No, it's not. Relentless is annoying. Determined is admirable. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. You have an answer for everything. One of my many charming qualities. The almost smile faded. Mrs. Thorne will resign over this. Let her. I need a governess. You need a human being who actually likes children. Mrs. Thorne tolerates them at best. And I suppose you have someone in mind? I'll find someone. Someone who won't treat them like problems to be solved. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Elena held his gaze, refusing to back down. Finally, he sighed. Fine, but this is your responsibility. If it fails, it won't. Your confidence is astounding. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. I'm choosing to take it as one. This time, she definitely saw the corner of his mouth lift. It didn't last. The ice reformed almost immediately, his expression closing off. The girls will join us for breakfast, he said stiffly. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock sharp. If they're late, the arrangement ends. They'll be there. And Elena? He stopped her at the door. Don't make me regret this. I'll do my best not to, Your Grace. She left before he could change his mind, her heart pounding with something between triumph and terror. She'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. That night, Elena told the girls about breakfast. Their reactions were everything she'd hoped for and dreaded. With Papa? Lily whispered, her eyes huge. Really? Really, 7 o'clock, don't be late. Charlotte looked skeptical. He'll probably leave before we get there, or eat in his study. He promised he'd be there. Papa doesn't promise things. Well, he did this time. So wear something nice and prepare to make conversation. What do we talk about? Lily asked, panic creeping into her voice. Whatever you want, your lessons, your favorite books, what you saw in the garden today. What if we say something wrong? Elena's heart cracked a little. There's no wrong thing to say, sweetheart. Just be yourselves. After they'd gone to bed, Elena sat in her room staring at the fire and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. She'd pushed and pushed, assuming that Adrian would eventually bend. But what if he didn't? What if he showed up to breakfast and sat in cold silence while his daughters tried desperately to please him? What if this made things worse instead of better? The door opened without warning. Elena jumped, spinning around to find Adrian standing there in his shirt sleeves, looking uncomfortable and determined in equal measure. We need to establish some ground rules, he said. About? This. He gestured vaguely. Whatever you're trying to do. Elena stood, crossing her arms. I'm trying to give those girls a family. By destroying the structure that's kept them safe. Safe? They're not safe. They're suffocating. You don't understand the pressure of this position, the scrutiny. They need to be prepared. For what? A life where they're so terrified of making mistakes that they never actually live? Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Society is unforgiving, especially to young women. I'm trying to protect them. You're trying to control them. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one trying to control everything, rearranging the household, dismissing staff, making decisions that aren't yours to make. You married me. You told me to manage this house. That's what I'm doing. I didn't marry you to have you tear apart everything and rebuild it in your image. Then what did you marry me for? To be decorative? To smile at your guests and stay out of your way? Adrian's jaw clenched. I married you because I needed someone capable, someone who wouldn't fall apart at the first sign of difficulty. Well, congratulations. You got someone capable. You also got someone who won't ignore suffering just because it's convenient. They glared at each other across the space of the room, him silhouetted in the doorway, her back against the fireplace. This is my house, Adrian said quietly. My family. My rules. And I'm your wife. Your partner, not your employee. You knew what this marriage was when you agreed to it. I agreed to save my family from ruin. I didn't agree to watch children be emotionally abandoned. I am not abandoning them. Then what do you call it? Because those girls are starving for your attention, and you can't even give them 5 minutes without looking like you're being tortured. The words landed like slaps. Adrian recoiled, his face going pale. For a moment, Elena thought he'd leave again, just turn and walk away the way he always did when things got too real. Instead, he stepped into the room and closed the door. You want to know why? His voice was raw. You want to know why I can't stand to look at them? Yes. Because it's my fault she's dead. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Elena's breath caught. What? Caroline died because of me. Because of a choice I made. And every time I see those girls, I see her. I see what I took from them. What I took from myself. Adrian, don't. He held up a hand. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. Don't offer empty comfort. You wanted to know. Now you know. He left before she could respond, the door closing with terrible finality. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing. It's my fault she's dead. What did that mean? What had happened 5 years ago that had broken this man so completely he couldn't even love his own children? She had to find out, had to understand what she was really fighting against. But first, she had to get through breakfast tomorrow, had to prove to 2 terrified little girls that their father showing up actually meant something. Morning came too fast. Elena was awake at 5, too anxious to sleep. She dressed carefully, chose a soft blue dress instead of the severe grays she'd been wearing, arranged her hair simply, tried to look approachable instead of like she was preparing for battle. At 6:30, she went to collect the girls. They were already awake, dressed in identical white pinafores, their hair brushed until it shone. They looked terrified. He won't come, Charlotte said. He'll come. And if he doesn't? Then we have breakfast together, just the 3 of us, and that's fine too. They walked down together, 3 sets of footsteps on marble. The dining room doors were closed. Elena pushed them open. Adrian sat at the head of the table. He'd actually come. Lily made a small sound of surprise. Charlotte's hand tightened on Elena's. Girls, Adrian said stiffly. Good morning. Good morning, Papa, they said in unison, their voices barely audible. Silence stretched. Elena cleared her throat. Charlotte, why don't you sit here? Lily, next to your sister. They sat like wooden dolls, backs straight, hands folded. Adrian looked at them like they were strangers he'd been forced to entertain. This was going to be a disaster. So, Elena said brightly, pouring tea. Charlotte, didn't you finish that history lesson yesterday? The one about the Romans? Charlotte nodded, not looking at her father. Tell us about it, Elena prompted. It was about Julius Caesar. What about him? He conquered Gaul, and then he crossed the Rubicon. Adrian's attention sharpened slightly. Do you know why that was significant? Charlotte's eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to actually speak. Because it meant war? It meant a point of no return. Once he crossed that river with his army, there was no going back. He'd either win everything or lose everything. Like a gamble, Charlotte said quietly. Exactly like a gamble. Lily had been watching this exchange like a spectator at a play. Now she spoke up, voice small but determined. I like the story about Romulus and Remus better, the one with the wolf. Adrian looked at his youngest daughter, and something crossed his face, pain, recognition, something else Elena couldn't quite name. Do you remember who told you that story? He asked. Lily shook her head. Your mother loved that story. She said it showed that family could be found in unexpected places. The temperature in the room shifted, warmed, just slightly. I don't remember Mama very well, Lily admitted. She had a laugh like yours, light, like bells. Charlotte was staring at her father like she'd never seen him before. You never talk about Mama. I know. Mrs. Thorne said we shouldn't ask about her, that it made you sad. Adrian's hand tightened on his teacup. Mrs. Thorne was wrong. You should always be able to ask about your mother. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This was it. The crack widening, the ice beginning to thaw. What was she like? Charlotte asked. And Adrian, for the first time in 5 years, talked about his dead wife. He told them about how Caroline loved music but couldn't carry a tune, how she'd insisted on keeping chickens despite the scandal it caused among the other duchesses, how she'd read them stories every night, doing all the voices until they fell asleep laughing. The girls drank it in like water in a desert. Elena sat quietly, watching her husband become a person instead of a statue. Watching his daughters see their father for the first time as something other than a distant, frightening figure. Breakfast lasted an hour. When it ended, Adrian stood. Tomorrow, he said to the girls. Same time. Really? Lily breathed. Really? After they'd left, chattering to each other in amazed whispers, Adrian looked at Elena. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For pushing, even when I didn't want to be pushed. It's what I do best. This time, when he almost smiled, it reached his eyes. But the moment didn't last. Mrs. Thorne appeared in the doorway, her face carved from granite. Your Grace, she said coldly, we need to discuss the household arrangements. Adrian sighed. Not now, Mrs. Thorne. I'm afraid it must be now. Her Grace has made it impossible for me to continue in my position. I'm giving my notice. You're resigning? Adrian looked more annoyed than upset. I cannot work under these conditions, with no respect for established routines, no support from you, and constant interference from— Thank you for your service, Mrs. Thorne, Elena interrupted. We'll have your references prepared within the week. Mrs. Thorne's face went scarlet. You can't dismiss me. His Grace agrees with his wife, Adrian said. Your resignation is accepted. The housekeeper looked between them, sputtering with rage and disbelief. Finally, she turned and stalked out, her footsteps sharp with fury. That was satisfying, Elena admitted. That was reckless. Now we have no governess. We'll find one. A better one. Your optimism is exhausting. You'll get used to it. Adrian shook his head, but the almost smile lingered. I doubt that very much. He left, but this time it didn't feel like running, just a man going back to work, slightly less burdened than before. Elena stood in the empty dining room, surrounded by the echoes of conversation and laughter, and allowed herself one moment of pure triumph. She'd done it, cracked the ice, made him see his daughters as people instead of painful reminders. It was a start, just a start. But for the first time since arriving at this frozen house, Elena thought maybe they could actually build something real here. The thought lasted exactly 4 hours. That's when a man appeared at the front door, demanding to see the Duke, his face twisted with rage and grief. Tell Adrian Blackmore, he snarled at the butler, that Thomas Ashford is here, and I'm going to make him answer for what he did to my sister. Elena heard the commotion from upstairs. Raised voices. The butler's attempts at placating someone. Heavy footsteps on marble that sounded like violence waiting to happen. She reached the entrance hall just as Adrian emerged from his study, his face already shifting into that cold mask he wore when dealing with unpleasantness. The man in the doorway was maybe 35, dressed in travel-stained clothes, his face haggard with sleeplessness and something darker. Grief, Elena realized, the kind that had festered into rage. Thomas, Adrian said, his voice carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Is it? Is it really? Thomas Ashford's hands were shaking. 5 years. 5 years I've waited for answers. For justice. And you've hidden behind your title and your money and your precious reputation. I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish by coming here. I want the truth, Thomas's voice cracked. I want you to tell me why my sister is dead. I want you to look me in the eye and explain how the woman you supposedly loved ended up in a grave while you walked away without a scratch. The temperature in the hall plummeted. Adrian's face went white, then hardened into something that looked almost cruel. Get out. No, not this time. Not until you answer for what you did. Elena stepped forward before she could think better of it. Mr. Ashford, I'm Elena Blackmore. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. Thomas's eyes swung to her, taking in the expensive dress, the Blackmore rubies at her throat. You remarried. Of course you did. Couldn't wait, could you? My sister not even cold in her grave and you've already replaced her. That's enough, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. Is it? Because I don't think it is. I don't think 5 years of silence is enough. I don't think your new wife knowing what kind of man she married is enough. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I have Caroline's letters, Adrian, the ones she wrote to me in the months before she died, the ones where she talked about how you'd changed, how you were taking risks, making dangerous choices, keeping secrets. Adrian's jaw clenched. Those letters were private. She was my sister. She told me things she couldn't tell anyone else, and she was terrified. Of you, of what you were involved in, of what would happen if... That's not how it was. Then how was it? Tell me. Explain to me why a healthy 28-year-old woman suddenly died in her sleep, why the doctor's report was sealed, why you refused to let anyone see her before the funeral, why you've spent 5 years acting like she never existed. Elena's heart was pounding. She looked at Adrian, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, the way his hands had curled into fists. Leave, Adrian said. Now, before I have you thrown out. I'm not going anywhere. Not until Weatherby. Escort Mr. Ashford from the premises. The butler stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. Thomas backed toward the door, but his eyes never left Adrian. You can't run forever, he said. The truth always comes out. And when it does, everyone will know what you really are. He left, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the chandelier. Silence flooded the hall like ice water. Elena waited for Adrian to explain, to deny, to say something that would make sense of what had just happened. Instead, he turned and walked back to his study. Adrian. The study door closed in her face. Elena stood there, her mind racing. Caroline's letters, a sealed doctor's report, a healthy woman dying suddenly in her sleep, secrets and risks and fear. What had Adrian done? She found Mrs. Weatherby, the elderly maid who'd served Caroline, in the servants' hall, her face pale. You heard, Elena said. The whole house heard, Your Grace. Caroline's death. What really happened? Mrs. Weatherby's hands twisted in her apron. I don't know, Your Grace. None of us do. She went to bed complaining of a headache. The next morning, she was gone. Just gone. The doctor came, wrote his report, and it was all hushed up so quick. His Grace wouldn't let anyone ask questions. But you must have suspicions. It's not my place. Please, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. The old woman looked at Elena for a long moment, weighing loyalty against something else. There were rumors, she said finally, about His Grace being involved in something dangerous. Government work, some said, espionage. There were men coming to the house at odd hours, meetings behind closed doors. Her Grace was beside herself with worry. I heard her crying more than once. And then she died. And then she died. And his grace locked himself away for 3 days. When he came out, he was... She struggled for words. Broken, like someone had carved out his heart and left him walking around anyway. Elena climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her thoughts churning. Charlotte and Lily were in the schoolroom, attempting lessons on their own now that Mrs. Thorne was gone. They looked up when Elena entered, their faces brightening. "Did you hear the shouting?" Charlotte asked. "I did." "Who was that man?" Elena hesitated. How much truth could children handle? How much should they know about their mother's death, their father's secrets? "He was your mother's brother, your Uncle Thomas." Both girls' eyes went wide. "We have an uncle?" Lily breathed. "You do, though it seems your father and he had a falling out." "About Mama?" "Yes." Charlotte's expression turned calculating, older than her years. "He thinks Papa did something bad. That's why they were fighting." "Charlotte, I'm not stupid. I know people whisper. I know Papa changed after Mama died. I know there are things no one will tell us." Elena sat down, looked at both girls seriously. "Your mother died very suddenly. Your uncle is angry and grieving, and sometimes when people are hurting, they look for someone to blame." "Did Papa do something to Mama?" Lily's voice was so small. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." She meant it. Whatever Adrian was hiding, whatever had really happened 5 years ago, Elena was going to uncover it. Because those girls deserved to know the truth about their mother, and because she was tired of living in a house built on secrets and silence. That night, Elena did something she'd never done before. She broke into her husband's study. It wasn't difficult. The lock was old, and she'd spent enough time as a child picking locks on her father's liquor cabinet to know the basics. The door clicked open after 3 minutes of careful work. Inside, the study was dark, smelling of leather and tobacco and old paper. Elena lit a candle, her hands shaking slightly. She had no idea what she was looking for. Evidence? Proof? Something that would explain the man she'd married and the ghost he couldn't let go? The desk drawers were mostly mundane, correspondence, bills, legal documents. But the bottom drawer was locked, and this lock was newer, stronger. Elena worked at it for 15 minutes, swearing under her breath, before it finally gave. Inside was a wooden box. She lifted it out, set it on the desk, opened it. Letters. Dozens of them, tied with black ribbon. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. Caroline's letters. Elena knew she shouldn't read them. They were private, intimate, meant for Adrian's eyes only. She read them anyway. The first few were love letters from their courtship, sweet, shy, full of hope. But as she progressed through the stack, the tone changed. Caroline's writing became tighter, more anxious. "Adrian, I'm frightened. These men who come to see you, they're dangerous. I can feel it. Please, whatever you're involved in, walk away. For me. For the girls. For us. You say it's for a good cause, that it's necessary, but I see how it's changing you. You barely sleep. You're always looking over your shoulder. This isn't the life I thought we'd have. I found the papers in your desk. I know what you're planning. Adrian, this is treason. If you're caught." The letter ended there, unfinished. Elena's hands were shaking. Treason. What had Adrian been involved in? She kept reading, her heart pounding. "You've made your choice. I can see that now. You're going through with it no matter what I say. I just pray you survive it. I pray we all survive it." The last letter was dated 3 days before Caroline's death. "I can't sleep, can't eat. Every knock on the door, I think it's someone coming to arrest you. Or worse, the girls ask why I'm crying. I don't know what to tell them. I love you. I hate what you're doing. I'm terrified I'm going to lose you." She hadn't lost him. She died instead. Elena sat back, staring at the letters scattered across the desk. This wasn't the story of a man who'd killed his wife. This was the story of a man who'd been involved in something so dangerous it had destroyed everything around him. But what? What had been worth risking everything? A sound made her freeze. Footsteps in the corridor, coming closer. Elena shoved the letters back in the box back in the drawer, tried to lock it. The study door opened. Adrian stood there, still dressed from dinner, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked at Elena, at the candle, at the desk drawer she was frantically trying to close. "Breaking and entering," he said, his voice empty. "How very thorough of you." "Adrian, don't!" He walked to the desk, pulled the drawer open, lifted out the box. "You want to know? Fine. Let's get this over with." He sat heavily in his chair, opened the box, stared at Caroline's letters like they might bite him. "5 years ago," he said, "I was approached by certain members of the government. There was a plot, a group of men planning to assassinate the prime minister and overthrow the monarchy. They needed someone on the inside, someone with access to the aristocracy, someone above suspicion." Elena's breath caught. "You were a spy." "I was an idiot. I thought I was being patriotic, serving my country. I didn't think about what it would cost." Caroline found out. She found everything, the documents, the plans, the names. She was terrified, begged me to stop. But I couldn't. I was in too deep. If I'd backed out, they would have known, would have come after me, after her, after the girls. So you kept going. Adrian's hand tightened on the glass. "The night before the planned assassination, Caroline confronted me, told me she was going to expose everything if I went through with it. She'd go to the authorities, turn over the evidence, sacrifice both of us if it meant stopping it. She was trying to save you. She was trying to save everyone. But she didn't understand. The men I was working with, they weren't playing games. When they found out she knew..." He stopped, his voice breaking. "They poisoned her, made it look like natural causes, sealed the doctor's report. And they told me if I said one word, if I tried to investigate or seek justice, they'd kill my daughters too." The room spun. Elena gripped the edge of the desk. "You let them think you did it. Let everyone believe you were responsible. What was I supposed to do? Tell the truth and watch Charlotte and Lily die?" "I made my choice. I stayed silent. I let Caroline's brother hate me. I let society whisper. I let my own daughters grow up afraid of me because I couldn't bear to be close to them, couldn't risk anyone noticing how much they meant to me. You were protecting them. I was failing them. Every single day. Caroline died trying to stop me from making a terrible mistake, and I couldn't even honor her memory by being a decent father." Elena moved around the desk, knelt beside his chair. "Adrian, you have to tell Thomas the truth." "I can't. The men involved, some of them are still in power. If word got out that I was prepared to talk, they already think you might. That's why Thomas is here now, stirring things up. They're probably watching to see what you do." Adrian looked at her, his eyes hollow. "You don't understand. These people, they don't make threats. They act. If I give them any reason to think I'm a liability, then we find evidence, proof, something that protects you and the girls. There is no evidence. I destroyed everything years ago." "Are you sure?" "Because Caroline kept letters." "What else might she have kept?" Something flickered in Adrian's expression. "Her diary. She always kept a diary." "Where is it?" "I don't know. I had her things packed away. I couldn't bear to go through them." "Then we go through them now." Adrian stood, swaying slightly. The whiskey, Elena realized. He'd been drinking before he found her. "You don't have to do this," he said. "This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is. I married you. I'm raising your daughters. Your fight is my fight." "You could leave. Take the girls somewhere safe. I could arrange..." "I'm not leaving, and neither are you. We're going to face this. Together." He looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "Why? Why would you risk yourself for this?" "Because Charlotte and Lily deserve to know their father isn't a monster. Because you deserve to stop running from ghosts. Because someone has to fight for this family, and it might as well be me." Adrian's control cracked. He pulled her up, gripped her shoulders. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both." His hands tightened. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, or push her away, or break down entirely. Instead he let her go, stepped back. "Caroline's things are in the attic, 3rd floor, east wing. I haven't been up there since it happened." "Then it's time." They climbed the stairs together, carrying candles that threw dancing shadows on the walls. The east wing felt abandoned, dust thick on the floor, cobwebs in the corners. The attic door was locked. Adrian produced a key from his pocket, his hand trembling slightly as he fitted it into the lock. Inside, trunks and boxes were stacked against the walls, all carefully labeled in a housekeeper's neat hand. Duchess, personal items. Duchess, clothing. Duchess, books. Elena opened the trunk marked personal items. Inside were the artifacts of a life cut short. Hairbrushes with golden strands still caught in the bristles. Perfume bottles, the scent long faded. Jewelry boxes. Handkerchiefs embroidered with Caroline's initials. And at the bottom, wrapped in silk, a leather-bound diary. Elena lifted it out with trembling hands. The leather was soft, well worn. Caroline had held this, written in this, poured her thoughts and fears and hopes into these pages. "Are you going to open it?" Adrian asked. "Are you ready for what might be inside?" "No, but open it anyway." Elena unwrapped the silk, opened the diary to the last entry. Caroline's handwriting was shaky, rushed. "If something happens to me, if I don't survive what's coming, someone needs to know the truth. Adrian is not who they think he is. He's trying to stop something terrible. The men he's working with, Lord Pemberton, Colonel Ashworth, Sir Edmund Clark, they're planning to kill the Prime Minister during the Queen's Jubilee. Adrian infiltrated their group to gather evidence. He's been risking his life for months. But they're suspicious. I found a letter today threatening him, threatening all of us. Adrian won't back down. He says, 'Too many lives are at stake. I'm terrified, not of him, for him.' I've hidden copies of everything, the names, the plans, the evidence, in a place only he would think to look. If I'm gone, if Adrian is blamed, someone needs to find this. Someone needs to know he was trying to save people, not hurt them." The entry ended there. Elena looked at Adrian. "She hid evidence. Evidence that would clear your name." "Where?" "She says only I would know, but I have no idea. See, think. Where would Caroline hide something she wanted only you to find?" Adrian's face went blank with concentration. Then something shifted. "The music room. We used to hide notes for each other in the piano. It was our thing. Before the girls were born, before everything got complicated. They ran. Actually ran through the house, not caring who they woke, their footsteps echoing. The music room was on the second floor, shut up for years. The piano sat in the corner, covered in a dust sheet. Adrian pulled the sheet away, lifted the piano's lid, reached inside to where the strings met the soundboard. His fingers found something, a oilskin packet, wedged carefully out of sight. He pulled it free, unwrapped it with shaking hands. Inside were papers, documents bearing official seals, lists of names, a detailed account of the assassination plot in Caroline's careful handwriting, and a letter addressed to Adrian. "My love, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I wanted to stop you from throwing your life away, but I understand now why you couldn't walk away. You were trying to save hundreds of people, possibly thousands. The man I married would do exactly that. Don't blame yourself. This was my choice. I knew confronting them was dangerous, but I couldn't let you face this alone. Take care of our girls. Tell them I love them. Tell them their father is a hero, even if the world never knows it. And Adrian, live, please. Don't let grief turn you into a ghost. The girls need you. I need you to be strong enough to go on without me. All my love, always. Caroline." Adrian's face crumpled. He sat down hard on the piano bench, the letter clutched in his hands, and for the first time in 5 years, he wept. Great gasping sobs that seemed torn from somewhere deep and broken inside him. Elena knelt beside him, held him while he shook, while years of guilt and grief and self-hatred poured out. "She knew," he choked out. "She knew she was walking into danger, and she did it anyway to protect me. She loved you. I let her. I should have stopped her, should have locked her in her room, should have... You couldn't have stopped her any more than she could stop you. You were both trying to save each other." Adrian looked at the documents spread across the piano, evidence of conspiracy and murder and sacrifice. "What do I do with this?" "You give it to Thomas. You tell him the truth, all of it. The men involved are going to be exposed. This is evidence of treason, of murder. You take this to the authorities and you let justice happen." They'll retaliate. Maybe. Probably. But you can't keep living like this. And Charlotte and Lily deserve to know who their mother really was. Adrian wiped his face with the back of his hand, looking exhausted and raw and more human than Elena had ever seen him. You're right. You're absolutely right. I've been a coward. You've been surviving. There's a difference. He stood, gathered the papers carefully. I'll send for Thomas in the morning. Tell him everything. We'll tell him together. Elena, together, she repeated firmly. You're not doing this alone anymore. Something in his expression shifted, softened. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. This time, when he almost smiled, it was real. Sad and broken, but real. They left the music room together, the evidence tucked carefully under Adrian's arm. Dawn was breaking outside, gray light filtering through the windows. Elena should have been exhausted, should have been terrified of what was coming, the confrontation with Thomas, the exposure of the conspiracy, the potential danger. Instead, she felt strangely calm, like she'd finally found the thing she was meant to fight for. Thomas arrived at 10 the next morning, summoned by a terse note from Adrian. He came ready for battle, his face set in hard lines. I'm not leaving until... I know, Adrian said quietly. That's why I asked you here. There are things you need to know about Caroline's death, about what really happened. Thomas's eyes narrowed. If this is another attempt to... It's the truth. Finally. All of it. They sat in the drawing room, Adrian, Elena, and Thomas. The documents were spread on the table between them. Adrian told the story. All of it. The conspiracy, the infiltration, Caroline's discovery, her decision to confront the plotters, her murder disguised as natural death. Thomas listened, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, horror, and finally, devastating understanding. She died protecting you, he said finally. Yes. And you've let everyone believe you killed her. I had no choice. The men responsible threatened my daughters. But now you're willing to risk them by telling me this? Adrian's jaw tightened. Now I have evidence, and a wife who's too stubborn to let me keep hiding. Thomas looked at Elena, really seeing her for the first time. You did this? I helped. The credit belongs to your sister. She left the evidence where only Adrian would find it. Caroline was always smarter than all of us. Thomas picked up one of the documents, his hands shaking. These names. Pemberton is still in the House of Lords. Ashworth is a decorated colonel. And Clark is the Queen's advisor, Adrian finished. Yes, taking this public will be ugly. But necessary. These men killed my sister. They threatened children. They need to answer for what they've done. Agreed. The question is how. If we move too quickly, they'll disappear. If we wait too long... Adrian trailed off. Elena leaned forward. Then we don't go to the regular authorities. We go higher, directly to the Queen's private secretary, someone who can act swiftly and quietly. Both men stared at her. You have access to the Queen's secretary? Thomas asked. No, but the Duchess of Blackmore does, and I'm very good at writing persuasive letters. Adrian's almost smile returned. You're terrifying, you know that? I prefer formidable. It's the same thing. No, it's not. Formidable is respectable. Terrifying is just rude. Thomas made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Caroline would have liked you, I think. She always said Adrian needed someone who'd stand up to him. Well, he's got one now, whether he likes it or not. The letter was written that afternoon. Elena spent 3 hours crafting it, choosing each word carefully, building a case that was irrefutable. Adrian added his testimony. Thomas added Caroline's diary entries and his own sworn statement. They sealed it with the Blackmore crest, addressed it to Sir Henry Pembroke, the Queen's most trusted advisor, and sent it by armed courier. Then they waited. 3 days passed like years. Elena kept the girls occupied, shielding them from the tension that permeated the house. Adrian barely slept, jumping at every sound, convinced each moment would bring attackers. On the 4th day, soldiers arrived. Not attackers, the Queen's personal guard. They arrested Lord Pemberton at his club, Colonel Ashworth at his barracks. Sir Edmund Clark was taken from his office in the palace itself. The scandal exploded across London like a bomb. And in the chaos, a small notice appeared in the Times. His Grace the Duke of Blackmore has been formally cleared of any connection to the death of his first wife, the late Duchess Caroline Blackmore. Evidence has been presented showing that Her Grace died attempting to prevent a treasonous conspiracy. The Duke's courageous actions in infiltrating said conspiracy have been commended by Her Majesty the Queen. Thomas came to Blackmore Manor the day the notice ran, his eyes red-rimmed but clearer than they'd been. "I owe you an apology," he said to Adrian. "I've spent 5 years hating you for something you didn't do. You had every right. I let you believe it. To protect your daughters. I understand that now." Thomas paused. "I'd like to see them. Charlotte and Lily. If you'll allow it, they're my nieces. The only family I have left." Adrian looked at Elena. She nodded. "They're in the garden," Adrian said, "with their stepmother who insists on letting them play in the dirt like common children." "Someone has to civilize this place," Elena said. "Might as well start with the garden." They walked out together, Adrian, Thomas, and Elena, to where Charlotte and Lily were building something complicated out of sticks and mud. "Girls," Adrian called, "come here, please. There's someone I'd like you to meet." Charlotte and Lily ran over, muddy and laughing, so different from the silent ghosts Elena had met weeks ago. "This is your Uncle Thomas, your mother's brother." Both girls stopped, suddenly shy. Thomas knelt, his eyes filling with tears. "You look just like her, both of you. She would be so proud." "Did you know Mama?" Lily asked. "I did, and I have so many stories to tell you about her. If you'd like to hear them." Charlotte looked at her father. Adrian nodded. "We'd like that," Charlotte said quietly. "Very much." Elena watched the 4 of them, Adrian, Thomas, Charlotte, Lily, beginning the slow process of healing, of becoming a family again. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this was perfect. Adrian still woke with nightmares. The girls still had moments of fear. Thomas still carried his grief like a weight. But they were trying, moving forward, building something real from the rubble of tragedy. That night, after the girls were in bed and Thomas had left for his hotel, Adrian found Elena in the library. She was reading by the fire, curled in a chair that was probably worth more than her father's entire estate. "Thank you," he said. She looked up. "For what?" "For everything. For pushing when I needed to be pushed, for refusing to accept the easy lies, for fighting for my daughters when I'd forgotten how." "You didn't forget. You were just buried under grief." Adrian sat in the chair across from her. In the firelight, his face looked younger, less haunted. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what Caroline wrote in her letter, about not letting grief turn me into a ghost." And I've been a ghost for 5 years, walking through my own life without really living it. That ends now. Good. Starting with this marriage. Elena's heart skipped. "What about it?" "We agreed it was a practical arrangement, nothing more. But I'd like to renegotiate those terms, if you're willing." "What are you proposing?" Adrian leaned forward, his eyes intense. "A real marriage. A real partnership. Not just for the girls, but for us. You've already given me more in 3 weeks than I deserved. I'd like the chance to give you something back." "Like what?" "Honesty, respect, trust, and maybe, eventually, if you're patient with a broken man who's forgotten how—" He paused. "Love." Elena's breath caught. "You don't have to." "I want to. I want to try. You've earned that much from me." She set down her book, studied his face. "This isn't gratitude talking or obligation. It's terror, mostly. Terror that you'll say no, that I've already ruined whatever chance we might have had." "You haven't ruined anything. But Adrian, I'm not Caroline. I'm never going to be Caroline. If we do this, it has to be about who we actually are, not who you wish I could be." "I know, and I don't want you to be Caroline. I want you to be Elena, sharp-tongued, stubborn, relentless Elena, who breaks into locked rooms and bullies dukes and refuses to let anyone hide from the truth." "Formidable," Elena corrected with a smile. "Formidable," he agreed. "So what do you say? Are you willing to take a chance on a reformed ghost?" Elena pretended to consider. I suppose, since I've already gone to all the trouble of marrying you, it would be wasteful to give up now. Adrian laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Then he stood, crossed to her chair, and kissed her. Not the cold, duty-bound press of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss, warm and searching and full of possibility. When he pulled back, Elena's heart was racing. Still terrified? She asked. Absolutely. Good. Me too. They stood there in the firelight, two people who'd been thrown together by necessity, finding something neither of them had expected. Outside, storm clouds were gathering. The men Adrian had exposed would have allies, supporters who'd want revenge. The scandal would rage for months, maybe years. There would be threats and challenges and moments when the easy thing would be to give up. But standing there with Adrian's arms around her, Elena felt ready for whatever came next. She'd walked into a frozen house determined not to become another ghost. Now she was going to make damn sure it stayed alive. The threat started 3 days after the arrests. A brick through the drawing room window with a note tied to it. Traitors protect traitors. A dead crow nailed to the front door. Anonymous letters accusing Adrian of everything from cowardice to conspiracy, claiming he'd fabricated evidence to save his own skin. Elena burned them all in the fireplace, one by one, while Adrian watched with an expression somewhere between gratitude and exhaustion. They're not going to stop, he said. I know. This could get worse before it gets better. The families of the arrested men have money, power, connections. They'll use every weapon they have. Let them try. Elena threw another letter into the flames. We have the truth, and we're not backing down. Adrian moved behind her chair, his hand settling on her shoulders. The touch was still new enough to make her heart skip, but familiar enough to feel right. You should be terrified, he said quietly. I am terrified, but I'm also furious, and fury is much more useful than fear. His hands tightened. When this started, I thought I was getting a convenient wife, someone to manage the household and stay out of my way. How's that working out for you? Terribly. You're the least convenient person I've ever met. Elena leaned back against him, smiling despite everything. Good. The next attack came at church. Elena had insisted they attend Sunday services as a family, all of them, including Charlotte and Lily. We're not hiding, she'd told Adrian. We're not giving them the satisfaction of seeing us cower. The church was packed, every pew filled with aristocrats and their families, all dressed in their finest, all pretending they hadn't been gossiping viciously about the Blackmores for the past week. Elena felt the stares as they walked down the aisle, heard the whispers that weren't quite whispered enough. Shameful, using his dead wife to... Convenient that evidence appeared after all these years. Those poor children, raised by a murderer and now a social climber. Charlotte's hand tightened in Elena's. Lily pressed closer to her father. Elena lifted her chin and kept walking. They took their usual pew near the front. The family behind them, Lord and Lady Ashworth, parents of the arrested colonel, didn't even try to hide their hostility. Surprised you'd show your face here, Lady Ashworth said loudly enough for half the church to hear. Given what your husband did to our son. Adrian started to turn, but Elena put a hand on his arm. Your son, she said clearly, conspired to commit treason and murder. My husband stopped him. There's a rather significant difference. You have no proof. We have a confession, signed documents, testimony from 3 separate witnesses, and the Queen's personal commendation. What do you have besides wounded pride and a criminal for a son? Lady Ashworth's face went scarlet. How dare you? I dare because it's the truth, and the truth doesn't stop being true just because it's inconvenient for you. The church had gone silent. Everyone watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Lady Ashworth stood, gathering her skirts with trembling hands. Come, Harold, we will not sit here and be insulted by this. Duchess, Elena supplied helpfully. The word you're looking for is duchess. Lord and Lady Ashworth swept out, their exit somewhat undermined by the fact that they had to push past 3 other families to reach the aisle. The vicar, looking deeply uncomfortable, began the service. Elena sat with her spine straight, refusing to show how hard her heart was pounding. Beside her, Adrian's jaw was tight, but when she glanced at him, he was almost smiling. After the service, as they filed out into gray morning light, more than one person pointedly turned their back, but a very few, nodded, acknowledged them. One elderly duchess even smiled. "Well handled, my dear," she said to Elena. "It's about time someone put the Ashworths in their place." It was a small victory, but it was victory nonetheless. The real battle began when Elena hired a new governess. She'd interviewed 12 candidates, all of them varying degrees of terrible, too strict, too timid, too obviously appalled at the idea of working for the scandalous Blackmores. Then Miss Sarah Winters walked into the drawing room, and Elena knew immediately she'd found the right person. Sarah was maybe 30, with intelligent brown eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Elena of a particularly effective general. She didn't flinch when Elena explained the household situation, didn't gasp when she mentioned the girls had been raised under Mrs. Thorne's regime. "So you need someone who can actually teach," Sarah said, "not just enforce arbitrary rules." "Exactly. And you want the children to develop into thinking, feeling human beings rather than perfect little automatons." "That would be ideal, yes." Sarah smiled. "Then I'm your woman. When do I start?" She started immediately, and within 2 days had completely reorganized the schoolroom. The rigid schedule disappeared. The endless penmanship drills were replaced with actual literature. The girls were encouraged to ask questions instead of sitting in silent obedience. Mrs. Weatherby reported that she'd heard laughter coming from the schoolroom. Actual laughter. "Miss Winters is teaching them about mythology," the elderly maid said, her eyes bright. Lady Charlotte asked if Zeus was a good king or a bad king, and Miss Winters said that was an excellent question and they should debate it. Debate it? Each girl had to argue both sides. Lady Charlotte said it was the most fun she'd ever had in lessons. Elena found Sarah, after the girls had gone to bed, making notes in a leather journal. "Thank you," Elena said. Sarah looked up. "For what?" "For treating them like people instead of problems. They're bright girls, curious, thoughtful. It's criminal what was done to them. All that potential being suffocated under rules and routine." Sarah set down her pen. "Lady Charlotte told me she doesn't remember her mother. Lady Lily has nightmares about being locked in her room." Elena's chest tightened. "I didn't know about the nightmares. She's been hiding them. Doesn't want to be a bother. Those are her exact words. She doesn't want to be a bother. She's 6 years old." "Exactly. No 6-year-old should be that worried about being convenient." Sarah leaned back. "You're doing good work here, Your Grace. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But plenty of people tried. The invitations stopped coming. Calling cards were returned unopened. At the Modiste, other ladies would suddenly remember urgent appointments when Elena entered. She pretended not to care, held her head high, smiled pleasantly at women who cut her dead in the street. But it hurt. Of course it hurt. "They're children," she told Adrian one night, pacing their bedroom in her dressing gown. "Vicious, small-minded children. Your husband exposed traitors and they're treating us like we're the criminals. That's how society works. Scandal is worse than actual crime. That's insane. That's aristocracy." Adrian was in bed, watching her pace. "You could stop going out. Stay here. Avoid the worst of it." Elena spun to face him. "That's exactly what they want. For us to hide, to act ashamed. Well, I'm not ashamed, and I'm not hiding. I know. That's one of the things I—" He stopped. "What?" "Nothing. Adrian," he sighed. "That's one of the things I admire about you. Your refusal to back down even when any sane person would retreat. Are you calling me insane?" "Magnificently so." Elena climbed into bed beside him, still annoyed but slightly mollified. "They're going to get tired of this eventually. The scandal will fade. Something else will happen to occupy their attention. Maybe. Or maybe this follows us forever. Then we'll deal with it forever. Together." Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her in a way that still felt slightly foreign but increasingly necessary. "How did I get so lucky?" "Lucky? I've upended your entire life, alienated half of London society, and turned your daughters into question-asking rebels." "Exactly. Lucky." She laughed against his chest, feeling some of the tension ease. "You're strange, you know that?" "I've been told." They lay there in comfortable silence, the fire crackling in the grate, rain starting to tap against the windows. "Elena?" "Hmm?" "I love you." Her breath caught. He'd said he wanted to try, wanted to build toward that, but she hadn't expected. "You don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "I know this started as an arrangement. I know you probably still see it that way, but I needed you to know. You've given me back my life, my daughters, myself, and I love you for it." Elena turned to face him, her hand against his chest where she could feel his heart pounding. "I don't see this as an arrangement anymore," she said quietly. "I haven't for weeks. Maybe since that first breakfast when you actually looked at your daughters and I realized there was a real person underneath all that ice. So I love you too, you difficult, broken, stubborn man." He kissed her then, and there was nothing cold or distant about it. Nothing that spoke of duty or arrangement, just heat and want and the kind of desperate relief that came from finally saying something that had been building for too long. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." Thank God for that. The turning point came from an unexpected source. The Queen herself requested an audience. The summons arrived by royal courier, formal and terrifying. "Her Majesty wishes to receive the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore at Windsor Castle. Tomorrow, at 2:00. "That's—" Elena stared at the heavy paper with its elaborate seal. "That's very short notice. That's the Queen telling us she doesn't care about our schedule." Adrian was already moving toward his dressing room. "We need to prepare. Proper court dress. You'll need—" "Adrian, breathe. We'll figure it out." But her own hands were shaking as she rang for her maid. The trip to Windsor took 3 hours by carriage. Elena spent the entire journey trying not to be sick from nerves. "What if she's summoning us to revoke your commendation?" she asked. "What if the families of the arrested men convinced her we fabricated everything? Then we tell her the truth again. We show her the evidence. We don't back down. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying. But we do it anyway." Windsor Castle loomed like something from a fairy tale, all towers and flags and guards in elaborate uniforms. Inside was even more intimidating, gilt everything, portraits of stern monarchs, servants who moved like they were performing a choreographed dance. They were led through endless corridors to a private receiving room. And there she was. Victoria, Queen of England, smaller than Elena had imagined, but with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. They bowed and curtsied, murmuring the proper greetings. "Rise," the Queen said. "We wish to speak plainly." Elena and Adrian straightened, both trying not to look as terrified as they felt. "Your Grace," Victoria said to Adrian, "you served your country at great personal cost. Your wife died because of it. You spent 5 years under suspicion. That is unconscionable." "Your Majesty, She held up a hand. "We are not finished. You, Your Grace," she turned to Elena, "uncovered a conspiracy that threatened not only the Prime Minister but the stability of the realm. You refused to accept comfortable lies in favor of difficult truths. That took courage." "I was just trying to help my family, Your Majesty." "You helped the entire nation. The men you exposed were planning chaos. Your actions prevented it." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "We understand society has not been kind to you since the arrests. Some people don't like having their comfortable assumptions challenged," Elena said carefully. "Some people are fools. We are not some people." The Queen stood, which meant they all stood. "You will attend the Winter Ball next month. As our personal guest, let society see that we value truth and courage over comfortable conformity." Elena's heart stopped. The Winter Ball was the event of the season. An invitation was coveted. A personal invitation from the Queen was unheard of. "Your Majesty, we're honored. You're being rewarded. There's a difference." Victoria smiled, just slightly. "Though we confess we are also curious to see how Lady Ashworth reacts when she realizes she must share a ballroom with the woman who publicly dismantled her." Adrian made a sound that might have been a laugh quickly disguised as a cough. They left Windsor Castle in a daze. Did that actually happen? Elena asked as their carriage pulled away. I think so, unless we're both having the same very vivid hallucination. The Queen invited us to the winter ball. She did, as her personal guests. Yes. We're going to need new clothes. I'm going to need an entirely new wardrobe and dancing lessons. Oh God, Adrian, I can't remember the steps to half these dances. He caught her hands, laughing. We'll figure it out, together. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. We're a team now, partners. Whatever comes next, we face it side by side. Elena squeezed his hands, feeling something settle in her chest. Not the end of fear or uncertainty, but the beginning of real hope. News of the Queen's invitation spread through London like wildfire. Suddenly, the invitations started arriving again. Calling cards, requests for tea. People who'd cut them dead in the street last week were now desperately trying to secure their favor. Elena took vicious pleasure in returning most of them unopened. Is it petty? She asked Sarah one afternoon while the governess supervised the girls' art lesson. Extremely, Sarah said cheerfully. I approve completely. Charlotte looked up from the watercolor she was working on. Mama Elena, what's petty mean? Elena blinked. I'm sorry, what did you call me? Charlotte's face went pink. I didn't mean... It just came out. I'm sorry. I know you're not really our mama. No, it's fine. It's more than fine. Elena knelt beside Charlotte's chair, her throat tight. You can call me whatever feels right to you. Both of you. Lily, who'd been carefully painting flowers, looked up. Really? Really? What about Papa? Charlotte asked. He doesn't like when we talk about Mama. Won't he be upset if we call you that? I think, Elena said carefully, your father is learning that holding on to the past too tightly means missing what's right in front of him. And what's in front of him now is two daughters who deserve all the love they can get, from wherever they can get it. Both girls looked at her with something between hope and disbelief. So yes, Elena said. If you want to call me Mama Elena, I would be honored. Lily abandoned her painting to throw her arms around Elena's neck. Charlotte, always more reserved, smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Elena held them both, blinking back tears, feeling like she'd just won something infinitely more valuable than any social victory. That night at dinner, they all ate together now, the five of them around the massive table that no longer felt quite so cold. Charlotte told her father about the new name. Adrian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Mama Elena? If that's all right, Charlotte said quickly. We know she's not. I mean, we remember that Mama was... Charlotte, Adrian set down his fork. Your mother would have loved Elena, would have approved completely. I think she'd be happy you found someone else to fill that role. Really? Lily asked. Really? Caroline wanted you to be loved, to be happy. She'd care more about that than about titles or who deserved to be called what. Thomas, who'd been dining with them more and more frequently, raised his glass. To Elena, who walked into a frozen house and melted it from the inside out. Elena felt her face heat. That's accurate, Adrian finished. Completely accurate. They drank to that, even the girls with their watered wine, and Elena felt another piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Elena Whitford anymore, the unmarried daughter sold to save her family. She was Elena Blackmore, wife, mother, duchess. The woman who'd refused to let a house full of ghosts stay haunted. The winter ball approached with terrifying speed. Elena's new gown was a deep emerald that made her eyes look impossibly green. Adrian wore formal black with the Blackmore diamonds at his throat. Together, they looked like they belonged in a painting. You're beautiful, Adrian said, watching her adjust her gloves for the third time. I'm nervous. You faced down the Queen. You publicly humiliated Lady Ashworth. You broke into my study and solved a 5-year-old mystery. A ballroom full of aristocrats should be easy. You'd think so, wouldn't you? The carriage ride felt too short. Suddenly they were there, climbing marble steps, being announced to a ballroom glittering with candlelight and jewels, and people who'd been talking about them for weeks. The room went quiet when their names were called. Their Graces, the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore. Every eye turned to watch them descend the grand staircase. Elena held her head high, her hand on Adrian's arm, refusing to show fear. Halfway down, she saw Lady Ashworth's face go purple with rage. At the bottom, the Queen herself was waiting. "Your Graces," Victoria said warmly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "How delightful that you could attend. Come, you must sit near us at dinner. We have so much to discuss." The message was clear. The Blackmores had the Queen's favor. Anyone who wanted to maintain their own position had better adjust their opinions accordingly. The whispers started immediately, not vicious now, but speculative, reassessing. Adrian leaned down to whisper in Elena's ear. "Told you. Easy. Liar. Beautifully effective liar." They danced. Not perfectly. Elena did in fact forget several steps, and Adrian had to guide her through, but well enough. And more importantly, they danced while everyone watched, while society slowly, grudgingly began to accept that the scandal wasn't going away, that the Blackmores were here to stay. During a break between dances, Thomas found them. "I have news," he said quietly. "The trial concluded this afternoon. Guilty verdicts. All three of them." Adrian's face showed nothing, but Elena felt him tense beside her. "Sentencing?" he asked. "Execution. Within the month." It should have felt like victory, justice for Caroline, protection from future threats. Instead, Elena just felt tired. "Does it help?" she asked Thomas. "Knowing they'll pay for what they did?" "Not as much as I thought it would. Caroline is still gone. No verdict changes that." He looked at Adrian. "But it helps knowing the truth came out, that she's remembered as a hero instead of just a tragedy." "She was always a hero," Adrian said quietly. "We just forgot for a while." The orchestra struck up another dance. Adrian held out his hand to Elena. "Shall we?" "We shall." They moved back onto the floor, and this time Elena didn't miss a single step. Around them, the cream of London society whirled and whispered and slowly, grudgingly, made space for the couple who'd refused to stay broken. The house felt different when they returned home near dawn, lighter, warmer, like something fundamental had shifted in its bones. Elena kicked off her shoes in the entrance hall, scandalous, but her feet were killing her, and looked up at Caroline's portrait. The dead Duchess still looked beautiful, still seemed to watch everything with those impossibly blue eyes. But she didn't feel like a ghost anymore, just a woman who'd loved her family enough to die for them, who'd left evidence to clear her husband's name because she believed in truth even when it cost everything. "Thank you," Elena said quietly to the portrait. Adrian came up behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "For what?" "For leaving me a family to save, for making sure Adrian knew where to find the truth, for giving them to me, I suppose. Charlotte and Lily and this difficult, wonderful man." "You're thanking a painting." "I'm thanking the woman in it. There's a difference." Adrian turned her to face him. In the early morning light filtering through dirty windows, he looked younger than his years, less haunted. "She would have liked you," he said. "Caroline. She would have approved of everything you've done." "You think?" "I know. She always said the house needed more life in it. More noise and chaos, and people willing to break the rules when the rules were stupid. You're exactly what she would have wanted." Elena leaned into him, breathing in the scent of him, soap and wool and something uniquely Adrian. "We did it," she said. "Did what?" "Survived. Faced the worst of it and came out the other side. We're not done yet. There will be more challenges, more people who resent us, more—" "I know, but tonight, right now, we won. Let me have that." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "All right, we won." Upstairs, Charlotte and Lily would be sleeping, safe and warm, with a governess who actually cared about them, and an uncle who told them stories about their mother, and a future that didn't involve being locked away like shameful secrets. The house was still too big, still too full of dark wood and cold marble, but it was becoming a home. One difficult day at a time. One difficult day at a time turned into weeks, then months. Winter gave way to a reluctant spring that painted the gardens in colors Elena hadn't known existed at Blackmore Manor. The roses climbed higher, the fountain was repaired and actually worked, water splashing cheerfully in a way that felt almost defiant against years of silence. Charlotte turned 10. They threw her a birthday party, an actual party with other children, not the quiet, somber acknowledgement Mrs. Thorne would have allowed. 8 girls from neighboring families came, and if some of their mothers looked uncomfortable dropping them off at the scandalous Blackmore estate, well, the girls themselves had a wonderful time. Elena watched from the drawing room window as Charlotte laughed with friends, as Lily ran circles around the garden fountain, as Adrian, sat on a blanket supervising the chaos with something that looked almost like contentment. "You've worked a miracle here," Sarah said, coming to stand beside her. "I didn't work a miracle. I just refused to accept that frozen was the only option. That's what miracles are, Your Grace, refusal to accept the unacceptable." Below, one of the girls shrieked as another pushed her into the fountain. Instead of crying, she laughed and pulled her attacker in after her. Within seconds, half the party was soaked and giggling. Adrian looked up at the window, caught Elena's eye, and shrugged helplessly. She smiled, feeling something warm and permanent settle in her chest. But spring also brought complications. Lord Pemberton's widow appeared at the door one morning, her face ravaged by grief and rage, and something that looked like desperation. "I need to speak with His Grace," she told the butler, her voice shaking. "Please, it's important." Elena came down the stairs before the butler could decide what to do. "Lady Pemberton, this is unexpected." The widow looked at her with eyes that held too much pain to process. "I know what my husband did, what he tried to do. I'm not here to defend him." "Then why are you here?" "Because he left debts, enormous debts, and his co-conspirators' families are refusing to help settle them. I'm about to lose everything, the house, the lands, my children's inheritance, all of it." Elena felt a stab of unwanted sympathy. "I'm sorry, but I don't see how we can— I have information about the conspiracy. Things my husband kept hidden, things that never made it to trial, names of people who helped but were never caught, evidence of other plots." That got Elena's attention. "You're offering to trade information for money." "I'm offering to trade information for survival. My children are innocent in this. They don't deserve to starve because their father was a traitor." Elena studied the woman, mid-40s, elegant even in obvious distress, hands twisting a handkerchief into knots. "Wait here." She found Adrian in his study going over estate accounts. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening automatically. "Lady Pemberton is here," Elena said. "She wants to trade information about the conspiracy for money to settle her husband's debts." Adrian's face hardened. "No." "Adrian, I said no. Her husband tried to kill the Prime Minister, threatened our children. I'm not rewarding that. I'm not suggesting we reward it. I'm suggesting we protect innocent people from suffering for their father's crimes, just like you protected Charlotte and Lily." That landed. Adrian's jaw worked. "What kind of information?" he asked finally. Elena sent for Lady Pemberton. The widow came in slowly, looking around the study like she expected to be attacked at any moment. "Sit," Adrian said. Not kind, but not cruel either. "What do you have?" Lady Pemberton pulled papers from her reticule with shaking hands. "My husband kept records, names of sympathizers who provided money but weren't directly involved, plans for other attempts if the first failed, correspondence with foreign agents." Adrian took the papers, read through them quickly. His face went pale. "This is treason on a much larger scale than anyone knew." "Yes." Lady Pemberton's voice was hollow. "My husband was many things, but he was meticulous. He documented everything. Why are you giving us this? Why not use it yourself, blackmail the people involved?" "Because I'm tired. Because I want my children to grow up without their father's shadow, destroying everything they touch. Because," she looked directly at Adrian, "because your wife is right. Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes." Elena felt the words hit like a physical thing. Adrian set down the papers carefully. "How much do you need?" £20,000 to settle the debts and provide enough for my children's education." "That's a fortune." "I know, but this information is worth more. You could bring down a dozen more conspirators, prevent future attempts. The Queen would—" Lady Pemberton stopped, wiped her eyes. "I'm not in a position to bargain." If you can't help, I understand. Adrian looked at Elena. She nodded. 15,000, Adrian said. And you leave London. Take your children somewhere quiet, somewhere they can start fresh without the Pemberton name hanging over them. That's, Lady Pemberton's voice broke. That's more than generous. It's practical, and it's what my wife would insist on, so I'm saving us the argument. Elena smiled despite herself. They drew up the agreement that afternoon. Lady Pemberton signed with hands that had stopped shaking, her eyes bright with tears she was too proud to shed. Thank you, she said quietly. Both of you. I know my husband's actions hurt you. I know you have every reason to refuse this. We do, Elena agreed. But we're trying to build something better than revenge, something that doesn't just perpetuate suffering. After Lady Pemberton left, Adrian pulled Elena into his arms. You're going to bankrupt us with your compassion, he said. 15,000 isn't that much. It's enough, but you were right to push for it. I know. He laughed, the sound still slightly rusty, but getting easier every day. Your humility is astounding. I prefer confident. It's the same thing. No, it's not. He kissed her to stop the argument, and Elena decided she could concede this particular point. The information Lady Pemberton provided led to 6 more arrests, quieter this time, handled discreetly to avoid another scandal. But word got out anyway. It always did in London society. The Duke and Duchess of Blackmore had single-handedly uncovered and dismantled the largest conspiracy against the crown in a century. Invitations flooded in. Not the reluctant, obligatory kind from before the winter ball. Genuine ones. People actually wanted their company, their opinions, their presence. Elena found it exhausting and slightly ridiculous. We're the same people we were 3 months ago, she complained to Sarah one afternoon while the governess helped her sort through calling cards. You're not, though. 3 months ago, you were the scandal. Now you're the heroes. Society loves a redemption narrative. We didn't need redemption. We didn't do anything wrong. You existed outside their comfortable assumptions. That's always wrong in their eyes, but now you've proven you're useful, so they're rewriting the story. Sarah held up an invitation. The Duchess of Marlborough wants you to speak at her charity event about courage in the face of adversity. Absolutely not. She's offering £500 for the charity of your choice. Elena paused. Which charity? Your choice. I could fund a school, a real school, for girls who can't afford governesses, where they learn more than needlework and how to curtsy. Sarah smiled. Then I suppose you're giving a speech. The event was in May, at the Marlborough estate with its manicured gardens and 300 of London's most influential women. Elena stood at the front of the ballroom, looking out at a sea of silk and jewels and faces that ranged from genuinely interested to obviously skeptical. She'd written and rewritten her speech a dozen times, had practiced in front of Adrian, who'd offered helpful suggestions like, try not to insult anyone, and maybe don't mention the time you broke into my study. Now facing the actual audience, Elena abandoned the prepared remarks entirely. I'm not here to tell you a story about courage, she said. I'm here to tell you a story about stubbornness. That got their attention. 6 months ago, I married the Duke of Blackmore to save my family from financial ruin. I knew the rumors, that he was cold, that he'd killed his first wife, that his house was full of ghosts and grief. And I thought, well, at least I'll be comfortable. At least I'll have a title and security. A few nervous laughs, but comfort turned out to be a cage. Security turned out to be silence. And I realized I had a choice, accept the comfortable cage or fight for something better. She told them about Charlotte and Lily locked away in a nursery, about Mrs. Thorne and her suffocating rules, about Adrian drowning in grief he couldn't express and guilt he couldn't escape. I wasn't brave, Elena said. Brave would be doing it without fear. I was terrified every single day, but I was also stubborn. Too stubborn to watch children suffer. Too stubborn to let a good man destroy himself. Too stubborn to accept that frozen was the only option. She talked about breaking into the study, about finding Caroline's letters and diary, about Thomas showing up full of rage and righteous grief. And here's the thing about truth, Elena said. It's inconvenient. It disrupts comfortable lies. It forces people to reassess their assumptions. Society didn't want to believe that the Duke was innocent, that he'd been serving his country, that his wife died a hero. It was easier to whisper and speculate and judge. She looked directly at Lady Ashworth, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. But stubbornness doesn't care about easy. It cares about right. And sometimes right means fighting everyone, your community, your husband, the entire social structure, because the alternative is worse. Elena paused, letting the words settle. The charity I've chosen to support is a school for girls, not a finishing school teaching them to be decorative, a real school teaching them to think, to question, to be stubborn when stubbornness is necessary. Because the world doesn't need more women who know how to curtsy. It needs women who know how to fight for truth, even when fighting is hard. She sat down to thunderous applause. The Duchess of Marlborough was crying. Half the room was crying. Lady Ashworth had left somewhere during the middle, unable to face the implicit accusation. Adrian found Elena afterward, pulled her into a quiet corner. "That was extraordinary," he said. "I may have gone off script." "You incinerated the script, burned it to ash. I loved every second." "Even the part where I talked about breaking into your study?" "Especially that part." The look on Duchess Marlborough's face was priceless. Elena laughed, some of the tension easing. "Do you think it helped, the speech?" "I think you just changed 100 minds about what women are capable of. Yes, I think it helped." The school was funded within a week. The Duchess of Marlborough contributed £5,000. Others followed. By the end of May, Elena had enough money to not only start the school, but ensure it could run for years. She threw herself into the planning, found a building, hired teachers who believed in education over decoration, developed a curriculum that included mathematics, science, literature, philosophy. Charlotte and Lily were her first 2 students. "But we have Miss Winters," Charlotte protested, "and you'll keep having Miss Winters for most of your lessons. But 2 days a week, you'll attend the school. You'll meet other girls, learn alongside them, understand that you're not special or different. You're just people who deserve the same opportunities as everyone else." "What if they don't like us?" Lily asked quietly. "Then they're foolish. But I suspect they'll like you just fine." The school opened in June, 20 girls on the first day, ranging from 6 to 14, some from wealthy families like Charlotte and Lily, others from working families who scrimped and saved for the opportunity. Elena stood in the main classroom watching them file in, nervous, excited, terrified, hopeful, and felt something break open in her chest. This was it. This was what fighting had been for, not social acceptance or personal vindication. This. Girls who would grow up knowing they could question, could think, could be more than decorative. Adrian came to the opening ceremony with Thomas and a handful of other supporters. He gave a brief speech about the importance of education, then let Elena take over. She didn't give a speech, just welcomed the girls, told them the rules, which were surprisingly few, and explained what the school was really about. "You're here to learn," she said, "not to be molded into perfect ladies. Perfect is boring. Perfect is restrictive. Perfect is for people who've given up on being interesting. You're here to become yourselves, whoever that turns out to be." The girls stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. Then one brave soul, a 10-year-old from the East End with sharp eyes and sharper questions, raised her hand. "Does that mean we can ask questions, even if they're rude?" "Especially if they're rude. Rude questions are usually the most important ones." The girl grinned. "I think I'm going to like it here." Summer settled over Blackmore Manor like a warm blanket. The house that had felt like a mausoleum 6 months ago was now full of noise and life and the kind of chaos that came from actually living instead of just existing. Charlotte and Lily brought friends home from school. Thomas visited weekly, often staying for dinner and entertaining everyone with stories about Caroline that made the girls laugh instead of cry. Sarah proved to be not just an excellent governess, but a good friend. Someone Elena could talk to about the challenges of running a school and managing a household and being married to a man who was still learning how to not be made of ice. And Adrian was different, still serious, still intense, still prone to brooding when he thought no one was watching. But the coldness was gone. The distance had thawed into something warmer, more present. He had breakfast with the girls every morning, helped them with their lessons sometimes, listened when they talked about their days, tucked them in at night with stories about their mother that were sad but no longer devastating. "You're a good father," Elena told him one night as they prepared for bed. "I'm an adequate father who's trying very hard." "Same thing. It's not—" He stopped, smiled. "You're going to say that to everything now, aren't you?" "Only when I'm right, which is always." He pulled her close, his hands settling at her waist. "I love you." "I know. That's a terrible response." "I love you too, you difficult man." "Better." They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, partners in every sense, running the estate together, managing the school together, raising Charlotte and Lily together, building something neither of them had expected but both of them needed. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. They still argued, still had moments of frustration and misunderstanding, still carried scars from everything that had happened, but they were trying, every day, and that was enough. The real test came in August. The Queen invited them to a private dinner at Windsor. Just them, Her Majesty, and a handful of her closest advisors. "This is unusual," Adrian said as their carriage approached the castle. "Private dinners mean serious conversations. Maybe she just likes us." "The Queen doesn't just like anyone. She's planning something." He was right. Victoria waited for them in a smaller dining room, elegant but not overwhelming. She smiled when they entered, a genuine smile, warm and slightly conspiratorial. "Your Graces, thank you for coming on such short notice." They sat. Dinner was served, 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last. The conversation was polite, careful, dancing around something nobody was quite ready to address. Finally, over dessert, Victoria set down her fork. "We have a proposition for you," she said. "Both of you." Elena and Adrian exchanged glances. "The school you've established," Victoria continued, "has been quite successful. 20 students becoming 40, 40 becoming 80. Girls from all backgrounds learning together. It's revolutionary." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Elena said carefully. "We would like to expand it, make it a model for other schools across England, but it would require significant funding, organization, and someone to oversee the expansion. Are you asking us to—" "We're asking you to lead the effort. The Duke would handle the administrative side, funding, buildings, legal matters. The Duchess would develop the curriculum and train teachers. Together, you would transform education for girls across the country." Elena's mind reeled. That's enormous." "It's necessary. England cannot compete with other nations if we continue to waste half our population's potential. Your school proves that girls can learn mathematics, science, philosophy. That education doesn't diminish them. It enhances them." Victoria leaned forward. "We need people we trust to do this properly. People who won't compromise, who won't back down when society objects. You've already proven you're willing to fight for what's right. Now we're asking you to fight on a larger scale." Adrian was quiet, his expression thoughtful. This would be a significant undertaking. Years of work. Potentially decades. "Yes, and substantial opposition. Many people still believe girls should be educated only in domestic arts. We're aware. That's why we need you specifically. You don't bend to opposition." Elena looked at Adrian. He looked back and she saw the question in his eyes. Was this what they wanted? To take on something this massive, this consuming? She thought about Charlotte and Lily, brilliant and curious, and finally allowed to actually learn. About the 80 girls currently attending their school, asking rude questions and discovering they were capable of so much more than society expected. About all the girls who could have that opportunity if someone fought for them. "We'll do it," she said. Adrian smiled. "We will." Victoria's expression was triumphant. "Excellent. We'll have the papers drawn up immediately." The carriage ride home was quiet. Processing. "We just committed to changing the entire education system," Elena said finally. "We did. That's insane. Magnificently so." She laughed, the sound a little hysterical. "What have we done?" Adrian took her hand. "We've chosen to fight for something bigger than ourselves, same as always, just on a larger scale." "I'm terrified." "Good. Terror means we understand the stakes. But Elena, we've already done the impossible. We turned a frozen house into a home. We exposed a conspiracy. We survived society's worst judgment and came out stronger. This is just the next challenge. Just. All right, it's an enormous, possibly insane challenge. But we're good at those. Elena leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. When do we tell the girls? She asked. Tomorrow, after breakfast. Give them one more night of normalcy before their lives get completely upended again. They're going to be excited. They're going to be terrified, which is appropriate. The girls were indeed both excited and terrified. We're going to help create schools all over England? Charlotte asked, her eyes huge. You're going to help. This is a family project. Elena looked at both of them seriously. It won't be easy. People will object. They'll say terrible things. Some of your friends might not be allowed to associate with you anymore. Like before, Lily said quietly. Like before. But worse, because we're not just defending ourselves anymore. We're challenging the way things have always been done. Charlotte's jaw set in a way that reminded Elena powerfully of Adrian. Good. Things have always been done stupidly. Charlotte, they have. Why should boys get to learn science and we don't? Why should we waste time on needlework when we could be reading philosophy? It's stupid, and I'm glad someone's finally saying so. Lily nodded vigorously. I want to help, even if people are mean. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. When did you two get so brave? You taught us, Charlotte said simply. You showed us that fighting for what's right matters more than being comfortable. I'm not sure that's a lesson I should have taught 10-year-olds. Too late. We learned it anyway. Adrian, who'd been quiet until now, put a hand on each girl's shoulder. Your mother, your first mother, would be very proud of you both. She believed in fighting for truth, even when it cost her everything. You're continuing that legacy. And Mama Elena, Lily asked, will she be proud too? Mama Elena is already proud. Every single day. The work began immediately, meetings with architects and educators and government officials, endless correspondence with potential donors and supporters, site visits to towns and cities that needed schools. Elena traveled more in 3 months than she had in her entire life. Sometimes with Adrian, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sarah helping navigate the practical details. It was exhausting, frustrating, occasionally infuriating when people dismissed the entire project as foolish feminine sentiment, but it was also exhilarating. Watching the first new school open in Manchester, seeing girls from factory families sitting beside daughters of merchants, all of them learning mathematics from a teacher who actually believed they could understand it, training teachers who'd never imagined they could do more than run finishing schools, giving them curriculum and support and the confidence to teach real subjects, fighting with town councils and school boards and conservative newspapers that published editorials about the dangers of educating women beyond their station, and winning. Slowly, incrementally, one battle at a time, but winning. By Christmas, there were 6 schools. By the following spring, 12. By summer, 20. Each one full of girls asking rude questions and discovering they were capable of answering them. Elena stood in their original school one afternoon watching Charlotte, now 11, help younger students with their arithmetic. She explained the concepts patiently, without condescension, breaking down problems until they made sense. She's a natural teacher, Sarah said quietly. She is. I think she gets it from Caroline. Adrian said she used to spend hours explaining things to the girls, making sure they understood. The legacy continues, in more ways than one. Elena looked around the classroom, 20 girls of varying ages and backgrounds, all focused on their work, all treating education as a right instead of a privilege. This was what fighting had been for. Not revenge against the people who'd hurt them. Not social acceptance or personal vindication. Girls who would grow up knowing they could think, could question, could be more than decorative. Girls who would change the world because someone had been stubborn enough to insist they deserved the chance. The anniversary of her wedding to Adrian came in November. 1 year since she'd walked into a frozen house, determined not to become a ghost. Adrian marked the occasion by taking her back to the church where they'd married. The same vicar, the same space, but everything else was different. Why are we here? Elena asked. Because a year ago, I made vows I didn't understand, promised things I wasn't sure I could deliver, and I want to make those vows again, with meaning this time. Her breath caught. Adrian, he took her hands, looked at her with eyes that were no longer cold, no longer distant. I vow to be your partner, not your master or your convenience. Your equal in everything that matters. Adrian, this isn't necessary. Let me finish. I vow to fight beside you, not behind you or in front of you. I vow to listen when you tell me uncomfortable truths. I vow to be a father to our daughters, all of them, including whatever children we might have in the future. Elena's throat was tight. Are you proposing we have more children? I'm proposing we build a real family, together, deliberately, with all the chaos and noise and rude questions that entails. She laughed through tears. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Good thing I'm not proposing. I already married you. I'm just recommitting to actually meaning it this time. The vicar, watching from the front of the church, cleared his throat. Would you like me to officiate something? I'm not sure what the protocol is for anniversary vow renewals. Just witness, Adrian said. That's all we need. Elena squeezed his hands. I vow to keep being stubborn, to keep fighting even when it's inconvenient, to love you even when you're difficult. I'm not difficult. You're impossible, but you're mine, and I vow to keep reminding you of that whenever you forget. Adrian kissed her, right there in the church, with the vicar as their witness and November rain hammering the windows. I love you, he said against her lips. I know. You're stuck with me now. Best decision I ever made. They walked out of the church hand in hand into rain that was cold but cleansing, washing away the last remnants of who they'd been when they'd entered that church a year ago. Back at Blackmore Manor, the girls had organized a surprise party. Nothing elaborate, just the family and a few close friends, celebrating not the wedding but what had come after. Thomas gave a toast. To Elena, who walked into a frozen house and refused to let it stay frozen. To Adrian, who finally remembered how to be human. And to Caroline, who left us too soon but made sure we'd find our way back to each other. They drank to that, even the girls with their watered wine. Later, after the guests had left and the girls were asleep, Elena and Adrian stood in the portrait gallery. Caroline's painting still hung in the place of honor, but it no longer dominated the space. Other portraits had joined it. Elena's official Duchess portrait, painted 6 months ago and hung beside Caroline's with Adrian's between them. Charlotte and Lily, captured in a family painting that showed them laughing instead of posed in formal stillness. She would approve, Adrian said quietly. Of the portraits? Of everything. The school, the girls, you, all of it. Elena looked at Caroline's painted face, still beautiful, still watching, but no longer accusatory, just there, part of the family's history, not its prison. Thank you, Elena said to the portrait. Not for the first time. Adrian pulled her close. For what? For choosing truth over comfort, for leaving evidence, for loving your family enough to die for them, for making this possible. They stood there in the gallery, surrounded by ancestors and memories, and the ghosts that had finally stopped haunting. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall. Inside, Blackmore Manor was warm and bright and full of life. The frozen house had thawed, and in its place stood something better, messy and imperfect and real, a home built not on silence and grief, but on stubborn love and relentless hope, and the kind of fighting that transformed everything it touched. Elena had walked in expecting to save her family from ruin. Instead, she'd saved an entire house from freezing to death. One difficult, magnificent, absolutely worthwhile day at a time.